This is a production.
Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's your boy Harrison here from Begginers Media. I'm going to get started on a tutorial for beginners when it comes to using Ableton Live 9. Just kind of brush over some of the basic features when it comes to getting started on making a beat, kind of jumping into workflow. So let's go ahead and get started on that. I'm going to go ahead and load up Ableton Live 9. For those of you who are familiar with Ableton Live 9, there might be a couple things in here you don't know, but for the most part, it's pretty much the basics. I'm gonna get into more details and some other tutorial videos, but as far as this video goes, I'm just gonna kind of stick with the basics and show you guys how to build just quick instrumental when using Ableton Live. So some of the features for you guys who don't know, this window right here is just kind of goes over, your plugins or your sources, your folders and everything are right in here. My third-party plugins is, everything that you see here in this window. So what I like about Ableton Live 9 is it's pretty basic. You can just find the plugins you want, drag it over, drop it. Now it's going to load it into a new channel. I personally don't use these 4 channels. I like to kind of start from scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and delete those. So some of the basic features when running Ableton Live is right here you have your tap. For those of you who don't know what a tap is, it's just kind of, if you have a beat or a tempo in your head, you can just kind of tap it with your mouse. You see the numbers start to kind of change. If you got a faster tempo, obviously that's insane. You can go up there. I kind of just stick to the basics tempos that I like. 135's one that I really like using for hip hop. Even though it sounds fast, or you can do it halftime. In halftime just pretty much means you're going to cut whatever number in half. Right over here is your metronome. That's to turn it on. Obviously it's turned off. If you click here, this is your count-in time. If you don't know what a count-in time is, it pretty much gives you amount of time from when you hit record to when it's actually going to start recording. And they do theirs in bar measurements, so it'll be a little bit faster if you're working in a faster tempo. So I like to keep mine around 2 bars. Obvious features, play, stop, record, your loop. I'll show you how to use that here in a little bit. So if you click onto your channel and say your VST disappears, and you're like, oh crap, where did it go? How do I find it? Just double click and you'll see your plugins right here down at the bottom. Just click on this little wrench and that's going to go ahead and pop it on and off. Just in case you thought you lost it. So I'm going to get started. I'm just going to kind of find something here that I like. Let's see. Yeah, I kind of like that. I have my MIDI controller off to the side. So when you start making a beat, I guess another thing that you should know is their mixing window is different than most mixing windows. You have these little circles, boxes here, and what they are kind of like track sequences. You can build multiple sequences in here. I'll go over that right now. So if you're used to other DAWs, you're going to be more likely used to working in a window that looks like this. I like building everything over in here into the mixing window. It didn't make sense at first when I was making instrumentals, because I was so used to working in building everything, all stacked in one window, but this is actually a nice way to start. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of play around a little bit, make a melody, and show you guys how to build something in Ableton Live. Now, if you notice when I played the beat and I was recording, the metronome wasn't on. You just want to make sure it's highlighted. I might have to do that over again, which is fine. Yeah. So, easy way, delete it. Now this is going to play the metronome with me. So, if you double click onto here, it's going to go ahead and pull up your MIDI. You can use this little angle on this bar. It kind of looks like a spyglass. You can just click on your left trigger on your mouse pad, pull down to zoom in, pull up to zoom out. When I first started using Ableton Live 9, I kept looking for the little zoom bars on the bottom like the older features, but this is actually pretty nice because you can use it multiple ways. You know, you can zoom in and then also pull to the left. It kind of speeds up that process. So I'm gonna go ahead and click Control A. That's gonna highlight all of my MIDI, and make sure too that you're not clicked up here when you hit Control A. You want to click onto this box. So Control A, Control U quantizes it. So this little feature right here, this is going to show you your bar counts, how many bars you're in. I'm going to go ahead and drag this over to 5. And if you're making, you know, a 4-bar, you know, count, you know, I usually always just pull it over to the 5. I'm leaving the space blank to kind of, you know, we're just playing around here, just kind of showing you the features. One thing that I do like about Ableton Live 9 is they already have kind of like a VST built in for those of you who don't have money for third-party plugins. I used to use Battery for my drums. I still do, but I am just going to show you what they have. So if you drag over, drop the drum rack. I'm going to make a couple here. Your tracks are all numbered. Obviously, first, second, third, fourth track. When you are recording your MIDI, you're going to want to make sure that your track is ARM, and that button will be right here, the little red dot. If it's not, you're not going to hear anything on your MIDI controller. Now it's being controlled. I'm going to come over here. If this doesn't pop up into your drum rack window when you click over, just double click. It's just to make sure that you're in it. I have all my drum packs over here on the left. If you have drum banks or anything, you can just click add folder, you know, search through your PC, find it, and then, you know, load it up right here. So cool feature is you just click, and now I have all my, you know, folders organized. And this pretty much depends on you, on how you organize your own stuff. It's pretty much gonna, you know, do it alphabetically, but kind of do it on your own preference on how you want this to be laid out, whatever makes it easier for you. So I'm going to click into a drum pack. So with Ableton Live, if you click on, you know, a wave sound, it's just going to keep playing it back in a loop. And you can just press down on your keyboard just to kind of look through them. So I really like that clap. So with the drum rack, it labels everything, you know, by your MIDI controller. You know, if you don't know what the difference between C1 is and C2 is, it's just an octave on your MIDI controller. C1 is your C note. C2 is just, you know, scale up from that. So I like to use everything on my C sharp. I like using the black keys. If you don't have a drum pad, I suggest using the black keys when it comes to using your drums. It just kind of kills that that delay between when you strike the key and when it actually hits all the way to the bottom. So once you have it laid in, you can click here to preview what sound You can actually build a whole, track of them, but I do everything one at a time. So I'm going to leave my metronome on. You're going to want to make sure that this down here is arm and this up here is arm, and we're going to go ahead and record the claps. So I'm just going to do everything kind of in a 4-bar measure. Double click your MIDI tracks, Control A, Control U. Now whenever I'm doing percussion or anything like that, I'm going to want to make sure that all my velocity is up all the way. And as you can see on these last two, they're not. So I hit Control A to highlight everything, pull down, pull all the way back up. Now everything's highlighted. I'm going to play this loop back and make sure that it's in sync. So everything sounds good. I usually like to build the drums because the metronome kind of gives me a headache, especially when I'm using headphones. So now the reason I made a couple of drum racks over here is I'm just going to do the same thing. See, when I clicked on this initially, it didn't load it up. Just double click. Now it's going to be here. I'm going to find this kick. I'm going to go ahead, drag it, drop it back onto my C sharp, trigger it, and now we're going to lay the drums. Now I'm using a separate MIDI controller off to the side. One thing I do want to point out, you can just click in and make your MIDI notes however you want to, whether you want to add them in or take them out. This is just kind of a quick way to do it. For me, I like using the controller and then kind of making modifications later. So I'm going to highlight everything, Control A, and then Control U to quantize. And I'm going to pull down, pull all the way back up. Now my velocity is maxed. I'm going to play that back to listen to it. See, and I like the way it sounds. It's small loop measurement. But the one thing that I'm going to show you that I do like about Ableton Live is these extra tracks down here that we were talking about earlier. Say you want to change up, you have this bar count, and you have this pattern for your kicks, and you're like, I like it, but I want to do something else. Maybe you want to do a bridge later in your track. It's actually pretty easy. You just arm the track again and then click it, and then you can just change the style of your kick, snares, or even your main melody without having to make a whole new track for it. So that is just a quick little change, it's a modification to kind of show you what they do. Obviously this was a little off, so I'm going to sync it back up. Control A, get my velocity all the same. So now I have two tracks in here. One's my original, one is my modified, and this is the easiest way to kind of keep everything organized, so you can continue to make layer upon layer without ever having to add another track. I didn't get this when I first started using Ableton Live. I was like, what was the point of having all this? Then after getting into production kind of deep with it, makes perfect sense to use it. So I'm going to go back to my original. And say, if I want to kind of condense everything here, I don't want all these notes. The same thing when you use the magnifying tool on the sidebar, click on it, hold it down, you pull to the right to zoom in, pull to the left to zoom out. But if you're like, hey man, there's too many notes here to kind of mess with, click fold, and that's going to just give you the one track that the one key that you used on this whole project. That way you don't have multiple keys. You're like, hey, I just want to edit the one track. You click over to here, fold, on, off, back over here. I'm just going to click fold. And the cool part too is it shows you the notes, A, D, E, F, and what octave it is. If you're not familiar with, A2, D3, just going up the octaves. I typically leave my velocities as is for my melodies, but depending on what you're making, you might want to, bring them up or down or however you want to do. There's some more stuff over here, but I'm not really going to dive into that. This is strictly, for beginners, for building. So I'm just going to do a quick little hi-hat. Now, this is what I was talking about when you're building your tracks. Say you don't have a MIDI controller, you can just go ahead and click on your drum rack. Don't do that. Don't drag it up here. Just find it, same thing, drop it onto your pad. Now you can preview it. Click record. Arm this trigger here. Now it's going to be recording. It's going to be recording right here. This track's a little loud. I'm going to pull it down. This is your master fader. And with your master fader, just controls the volume over everything that you have over here to the left of it. And that's just for those of you who don't know what a master fader is or never used a DAW before, that's pretty much what it is. So I'm going to pull it down a little. Now come back over here to my drum rack. Back over here, I'm laying out some hi-hats. I'm just going to double click and kind of get a sound for it versus playing it. This is for people who just want to use, the click option when it comes to their instrumentals. It's a little fast. Go ahead, delete. And say I like this pattern. I'm going to go ahead, highlight, pull up. Now, once you highlight too, if I were to just hit Control D, it's going to duplicate it right next to it. And some people, hey, it's kind of a pain. Just delete that. Make sure, you're on your next bar. You highlight over. Now you're going to give yourself that gap that you need so all of it is, connected at the right tempo. So that's just, one way of doing it. I typically will drag this thing out, drop it onto my 5. Again, hold down, zoom out, and this way you don't get a repetitive hi-hats. Now remember, same thing. If Control Z, back out, Control D to duplicate. If you, forget to highlight all the way over here, it's going to really throw off. And you don't want that. So Control Z, highlight. Now make sure that this stops all the way right here. Control D. So what I like to do is just kind of throw up a little bit of a change in some of the hi-hats. And I'll come over here and just kind of mess around with that. And it's all on your preference too. Like there's no one way of doing anything. This is just, a quick way to kind of build something. So another feature too, say you don't want to wait, you don't want to stop it and start all the way back to the beginning. If you hover over this bar and you see how it shows up this, speaker with the volume, it's going to start wherever your mouse is. So I want to start there. Now sometimes, it does a little bit of a glitch. So if it's starting too soon or too after, just mess with it. Or zoom in. But it'll get you close enough. So if I'm just building over here and I just want to sample this, I'm just going to click just to make sure it sounded on point. I'll turn these down. For you people who don't know, this just controls your decibels. It's just like any mixing board, you know, down turns the volume all the way down. As you pull it up louder, you know, it's gonna turn the volume up and down. These are all for individual tracks. So if you hit spacebar, that's a quick way of doing it. If you don't want to use spacebar, play button, stop button. If you just toggle your spacebar, it's gonna play the music and stop the music. What else do we have? So these numbers right here, if you want, you can turn off tracks. It's kind of like a mute button for, you know, if you're working with other DAWs, you know, they usually have a mute, but with Ableton, you can just click it till it turns, you know, gray. Now you're gonna see that it's playing something, but you're not actually going to hear it. And then you just click them back on. Now that's going to go ahead and play that back for you. Or if you just want to hear one track, solo obviously is going to mute everything else. It just kind of depends on your workflow. Maybe you're coming in from another DAW that, you know, similar to Ableton or not, but that's just how you use these. Your pans, I'm going to solo this. That's going to go ahead and change the pan from left to right on your headphones and on your main mix. Another cool feature is the sends right here. It kind of has a built-in auxiliary already. For those of you like me who started making beats in Pro Tools, you used to have to bus everything over to an auxiliary track and, you know, set up your reverb and delay so you didn't eat up your whole processor, you know, doing individual reverbs on each track. This is, you know, their solution, I think, to make it quick and effective. So if, say, I'm doing my clap and I want more reverb, see how it's labeled B and A. Look up here, A is for your reverb, B is for your delay. You just add a little bit more. The cool thing too is their reverb automatically syncs to their tempo. So if you change the speed of the tempo, it's going to change the speed of the delay. So I'll go ahead and show you. And that's a really cool feature that, you know, you used to have to kind of work with the VSTs to do that. That's a really powerful thing, especially if you're making like EDM music and stuff like that. Reverb, you know, and delay is really good. So it just kind of shows you what they have built into it. So I'm going to double click into my track. Another thing for beginners, if you're not used to building in your mixing board, in your mixing channel, I highly suggest right-clicking and color coordinating everything before you bring it over into your track sequence in the other tab. I'll show you how to do that right now. So you're just going to right-click and you're going to come over, and they have different color swatches. You just click on it and it automatically changes it. Next thing I like to do whenever I'm working on a project is title everything. So I'm going to play it. I'm going to go back to my original tempo, and you can just click on it, type the numbers, and it's going to go back to its original tempo. I'll rename this, you know, Japanese flute. Next track. I always solo everything out, especially when I have a big mix going. Turn that reverb down. My kick. Now, since I have multiple kicks, you can name it whatever you want. I'm just going to name this, you know, kicks 1, right click, rename, kicks 2. There's another, you know, fast way to do it is you can just click on the track and hold on Control R. And that's a quick way to rename if you don't want to use the right click option. But for this video, I'm just going to go ahead and use the right click. So now everything's built. If you noticed, next to your MIDI sequences, there's this little green arrow, and this one is not. It's just kind of like when you mute a track, it's gonna be gray. Same thing when it comes to your MIDI sequences. If it's not playing, it's gray. So automatically changes. So that's just one way of knowing if this is playing or not. It's going to come in handy later on, especially when you start building your song. I'm just going to kind of go over how to build a song real quick. I'm not going to go into crazy detail with that. I'm just going to kind of use what we have here. That way, when you're working on your own tracks, you're kind of know how to just jump into and start making your own song. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click onto my track. I'm going to highlight by using Shift and then just clicking on all of my MIDI tracks. Now, remember this little area that we were in before? This is, building your whole song. So what I'm going to do is, if you click on these little, it's going to toggle back and forth, or you can just hit tab on your keyboard and it'll toggle back and forth. I'm going to click on here, drag it over, come back, and drop it. So if I were to hit spacebar right now, you're not going to hear it actually playing what's on here. See, notice how it's faded out. It's kind of like, their little way of telling you, no, we're not playing these. We're still using your green highlighted tracks. This took me a while to figure out. When I first started using it, I felt like a moron. So the easiest way and the fastest way is you just want to click here. That little play button now lets you modify everything that's in this window. Same thing here, your magnifying glass, pull in, zoom out, however you want to do it. When building, go crazy. I'm just going to highlight, Control D, duplicate everything. If you click on this little arrow button, this is going to open up for your MIDI. It's going to show you everything that you're using. Hover over, zoom in. Now you're actually building. And this is why I wanted you to label everything, because you can accidentally, bring in, your hi-hats and drop it onto your kick track. And now when you play your kicks, now it's kind of cool, but it just keeps you organized and lets you know what you're using. If you want to get crazy, you can even rename your VST side and just say kicks. Now it's going to show you kicks, and now it's just telling me I'm using which VSTs I'm using. But obviously this isn't that, so I'm going to go ahead, Control Z, take it back to Nexus. I'm going to come back over here, and stop twice is going to bring you all the way back up to the top. Now this bar right here, this is for, say you're working on just a 9-bar section of your song and you just want to hear it loop back. So you're going to make sure this is all highlighted, come back over here to your loop, click on that. Now that's going to enable this to loop and play back and forth. So it just kind of loops that back and forth. Or if you same thing with this arrow feature, you can start it and it's going to roll back over to the top of your loop. So, and sometimes that's the only thing I don't like about Ableton is sometimes it's glitchy. It'll play it twice. I don't know why it does that. It's like once in a blue moon, it'll kind of get caught up and it'll play it twice. But it's not a big deal. But as you can see, when I'm in this mixing window, or not this mixing window, but this track window, if I'm back over here in this mixing window, everything, all these play buttons are off. Now say I add another, I want to build more on top of it. If I were to just drag over another Nexus and just kind of play something, if I were to hit record, it's not really playing any of this over here. And what I mean by that is, say I'm just going to delete these two, so you can hear it's just playing what's over onto this track. It's not really playing these. It's not playing the kicks. It's not playing the hi-hats. So when I hit record, I'll show you this. So now I'm recording. You see how it's green? I'm recording into here. I'm gonna hit fold. I'm going to do the same thing, Control A, U. Obviously these are off. Another thing, while I'm here, when you're playing notes, if you don't know what MIDI is, you can modify MIDI in almost every DAW by hand, and this just shortens it. And same thing, changes it from my original layout. I'm just double clicking and kind of modifying everything individually. If you've never used MIDI before, or obviously you have, or this is your first DAW, this is what MIDI is. So notice when it's long, it's actually playing the full key. When it's short, it's just like the hi-hats, it's only striking for this amount of seconds or milliseconds, or however short or long you make it, in your bar sequence. And that's just kind of a cool feature. Say you're kind of bored, and you don't know what you want to do, you can actually, just change it up a little bit, make something different. Back to what I was going to show you in the beginning is, I wasn't recording in this track. I was still recording over here, but I'm not actually playing everything that's over here. So to get these to where you're playing everything back again, just hit the play button. And now once every single track has been highlighted, it's going to completely pull you off of this. See how everything's now gray and it's not being controlled. Everything's back over here, and this is what I recommend, especially if you're adding more things back on. Make sure that you have all these highlighted again. Start building your sequences and just drag it back over. After it's labeled, make sure you put it into its its right track, because you don't want to mess that up. Now same thing, it's gray, so it's not playing this actual sequence. So click back onto this button. Now you're back into building your song, and however you choose to build and lay everything out is totally up to you. I'll get into another video later on about how to build full songs, how to build your verses versus your choruses. And this is just the basics for getting started in Ableton Live 9. If you have any questions, feel free to comment in the down below. Make sure to like and subscribe to my channel, Gamerlands Media. If you're interested in more things, I'm also going to be putting stuff up onto my website, gamerlandsmedia.com. Everything's going to be down in the description below. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little tutorial. I'll have plenty more coming out for you guys. See you soon.